Good Wednesday afternoon to you. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. We are getting set to talk plenty of Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. And we begin with a message from Baker Mayfield via Instagram. Today, the day that he is set to undergo surgery to repair that torn labrum and have all the surgery to get things fixed up. Appreciate all the prayers. Good luck wishes on the surgery, which is today. Excited to get it done and start the road to recovery. I'll keep you all updated. Thankful to have an amazing support group to help through this process. Again, that is Baker Mayfield. Actually, yesterday via his Instagram account, getting ready for today's surgery. Let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. And Scott, he's having the surgery on the West Coast. We're still kind of waiting to hear. You generally don't hear that they didn't go well. Usually everything goes well. That's kind of what we're waiting to hear.
Yeah, I think he had it this morning, and we expect some kind of statement from Baker. I don't know if it'll be a Instagram post or Twitter message or released by the team, but some kind of statement following surgery. Hopefully, that it went well and there's a timetable. But obviously he was looking forward to getting it done because it's been bugging him, right? It was week 2. So it's actually been exactly 4 months since he tore the labrum.
Yeah, and again, everything is connected and affects, the mechanics. So it is good for him to get that and begin the road to recovery. Ian Rappaport had this report a little bit earlier about it. And listen towards the end of this. This will give you an idea of what the expected timeline for recovery is. Here's Ian Rappaport.
Yeah, it is. Baker Mayfield finally having surgery on that torn labrum that he dealt with the entire season. And, it was a struggle. It was up and down. It clearly affected his play. And we don't know if it affected his decision-making, but it certainly affected just the way he threw the ball. A torn labrum on his left side. And, this has long been the plan, to get through the season, which he somehow did right until Week 18. And there was just no more chance of the Browns making the playoffs. And then at that point, he was done. The team was done. They all decided collectively to have surgery. So that is today. And for Baker Mayfield, this is a 4-month recovery. So he should be fine by next season. This is, as the Browns have said, their quarterback for 2022. There are really no issues there. So he's going to have surgery, heal up, be fine for the offseason.
And again, Scott, the 4 months, it's not concerning. But what is, anytime you have an injury like that, you tend to compensate, and I think that is some of the things that got his mechanics such a mess, as he was trying to compensate for what he could and couldn't do with his non-throwing shoulder.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I'm sure it played a part. And, he's wearing that bulky brace after the fracture in the shoulder in week 6. That affected him. And he told the Fox sideline reporter before the finale that he thought he'd be in a sling for 6 weeks. So that, that puts him back a little bit, but he should be ready to go at some point over the spring. I would think would be full go at training camp. And Alex Van Pelt, the coordinator, said he expected his mechanics to be back to normal. He didn't think it would disrupt him. It wouldn't permanently leave bad habits, that he'd be able to get back to normal, which is important because, accuracy is so tied into your fundamentals and technique.
So Scott, I mentioned this earlier in the week, and I got pushback because people misunderstood what I was saying. So the 49ers, with Jimmy Garoppolo as their starting quarterback, he has a 33-14 record. They saw the need to try to upgrade that position. They traded a couple of first-round picks, a third-round pick to move up 6 spots to take a guy, in Trey Lance in the draft that they knew was a developmental guy. Is that, and I'm not saying anything about Jimmy Garoppolo. He has a much better record as a starter, 33-14 compared to 29-30. Does that tell you, you're always searching for a quote unquote elite quarterback, and there aren't that many in the league? There's probably a handful that you would consider elite.
Yeah, I think that does tell you that, Dave. And I think it also shows you that when you're around a quarterback for a while, you see his flaws and his weaknesses. and you think, okay, I need to do better, right? This guy is preventing me from running my offense like I want, or whatever that is. And I think you saw it with Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo. I know you saw it with Sean McVay and Jared Goff, right? I mean, both those guys went to Super Bowls within the last 5 years. Garoppolo in the Niners and Goff in the Rams. And both offensive coaches decided, I want to move on, that I can't do what I need to do on offense with this guy. Now, that doesn't mean you can't win games, right? Goff had a winning record, I would think. You just mentioned Jimmy G's record, but it goes beyond that. You look at Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl, but that doesn't mean he's an elite quarterback. Same with Joe Flacco, right? So I think you are always in search for that elite guy, because if you look around, those are the teams with those guys are the teams that consistently go to the playoffs and compete to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and so, again, all I'm saying is Andrew Berry has to listen to everything, try to uncover, leave no stone unturned to find a guy that's a quarterback. And it may be that Baker Mayfield is the best option, but he's not doing his job as a GM if he doesn't leave no stone unturned to try to find that guy.
I completely agree with that. And I believe Andrew Berry will take that approach in this offseason. I expect him to explore all options that are available to him in a search to upgrade either Baker Mayfield himself, whether that's, a guy like Kirk Cousins or Derek Carr or Jimmy Garoppolo or Aaron Rodgers, whoever those guys might be that pop open, or by upgrading the position, by bringing in someone else to push Baker, compete with Baker, or just a plan B. That could be a veteran. It could be in the draft. I just think this position is too important, and you can't ignore the fact that Baker struggled this year. And we can debate how much of that was related to the shoulder, but he did struggle. He didn't play at a high enough level. And you look at his first 4 years in the league, he hasn't been consistent enough overall. And I think that makes you want to upgrade the quarterback position.
Yeah, and again, it's important to note he's 4 years in. Now there was some dysfunction in those 4 years, but he's 4 years in. All right. You also wrote something, 2021 in review, who to keep in free agency. So let's take a look with a little bit of a screen grab and take us through who you thought the Browns really, if you're going to tell us guys you think they need back that could be very, very valuable from this list, where would you go with it?
I'd start with Jadeveon Clowney. You need an end opposite Myles Garrett. You saw it with Olivier Vernon in 2020. He had 9 sacks. You saw it with Clowney in 2021. He had 9 sacks. I thought he played really well. Who knows how much of a raise he wants? Who knows if he wants to be here? I mean, he said he liked it here, but, they also changed the D-line coaches left for college jobs. Maybe he wants to go somewhere warm. We've seen he's comfortable bouncing around teams. But that position is important. He's obviously the number one guy there. Then tight end David Njoku. He played out the 5th year of that 5-year rookie contract. He'll get a raise from somebody. He wants to be here. I think the Browns want him to be here, so I expect that to get done. But you're talking, again, money. If, the Browns cap it at 8.5, and he thinks he can go get 12 on the open market, right? You just don't know. So those are the two guys. And then there's, kind of the Anthony Walkers and the MJ Stewart Jr.'s, guys that I think would be valuable to have, right? Maybe in backup roles who could step into starting roles. You saw Walker start a bunch this year. And that all comes down to how much money you're willing to spend.
How much do you think the Browns really missed a guy like Chris Hubbard? That was the swing tackle, your third guy. You didn't have Wills, you didn't have Conklin. So immediately you're going with guys that hadn't played a whole lot of NFL football as your starting tackles. And that probably factored into some of the struggles that Baker had as well.
Yeah, I think it's huge not having Chris Hubbard. I didn't mention him there to re-sign just because he ended the last 2 years on the IR with major injuries, right? He had a dislocated kneecap and a torn quad, I think in 2020, came back, made it back for week 1, and then he tears his triceps in week 1. I think he's 30 or around 30. I would think that the Browns would try to find someone else. Not that you can't bring Chris back and see if he fits in some role, but I don't know if you can count on a guy who's been through those type of injuries, and I love Chris Hubbard. But I think they need to find a swing tackle just as good as Hubbard and just as well as Hubbard played in 2020. You need that role. And it was obvious this season when Wills got hurt early and then Jack Conklin, they just didn't have somebody to step in like they needed.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we go to the voicemail of truth and reason, as always, about the quarterback. We'll also take a look at WAR, wins above replacement for injuries. Where do the Browns rank on that one? Sports for CLE. We'll be right back talking Browns. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
We continue talking Browns on a Wednesday afternoon. Time to head to the voicemail of truth and reason. This one about the quarterback, Baker Mayfield.
In regards to the Baker Mayfield story yesterday, I witnessed a statement from your guest saying Baker Mayfield was hurt all year and the Browns shouldn't trade him out of spite. Good teams don't operate that way. My initial reaction was that good teams do not operate in the sense of one person's beneficiary. If Baker Mayfield was obviously playing hurt the entire year, why not exercise that option earlier after it was obvious he could not live up to the expectations in the first couple games after the injury, and encourage him to get the surgery sooner so he could at least have maybe made the playoffs with the team we have. Instead, we get an experiment of just seeing how tough our quarterback is, even though we keep losing games we should win. Why do we have a competent backup if we're not going to use him? Going all in on one player for his money contract here is complete lack of accountability on behalf of the coach, and good teams don't prioritize one person over the team at any point. As a player, you go into play. You're not thinking about yourself or taking yourself out. That's why you have a coach to do that. We have wasted 1 year in this window with the talent we have, and everyone seems okay to waste one more just to see what we have in a 50-year quarterback. 5 years go by and we still don't know.
And Scott Petrak, that's there is some very valid points to that voicemail. I will say, though, you go back and forth with should they have played Baker Mayfield. At some point in time, you knew he clearly wasn't going to be effective. My gut feeling is the Browns felt with Baker Mayfield, they were a team that could get to the playoffs and make some noise. With Case Keenum, they were a fringe playoff team. I think they viewed there was that big of a drop-off between Baker Mayfield and Case Keenum.
I agree with that part, Dave. I'd push back on a bunch of the other stuff, though. First of all, how does Baker's going to be fined for the next season? So how did him playing all this season mess up anything down the road? If he had surgery in October, then he would still be in the same spot. He'd be coming back for 2022. So all you did was get more examples of Baker Mayfield on the field. And the Browns thought he could play. He thought he could play. The doctors thought he could play. So you play your starting quarterback. To me, it's that simple. Yes, I think he is better than Case Keenum. I think he's better than Case Keenum when he was banged up. I don't buy that the shoulder was the only reason he played poorly. He had a torn labrum in Cincinnati, and he was 14 for 21 for almost 300 yards and 2 touchdowns and completed the deep ball. It didn't affect him there. So I just think the whole argument is flawed. I would have played him as long as he was cleared to play. He wanted to play. It doesn't set you back in 2022. It shows you that it shows you his toughness, which everyone applauds. Alex Van Pelt, the coordinator, says, hey, you have to learn to play through injuries sometimes. So that's Baker learning to play through injuries in this league, and a lot of quarterbacks do. I just think it made sense, and I don't think it sets you back at all. And I just don't. So I think it was fine to play him. And, you go into 2022 expecting him to be the starter, and with it being a huge year for his future, because the Browns weren't going to sign him to a contract extension if they shut it down week 3. So I think I think they did the right thing. He just didn't overcome, and it's not just him, the entire team, but including Baker Mayfield, did not overcome the obstacles presented to them this year.
Yeah, that's fair. That's absolutely fair. All right, 2021 WAR, wins above replacement, lost to injury. And so you look at this big old graph, and what it tells you is the Browns lost the third most wins above replacement to injury. So Ravens were number 1, and that stands to reason. Washington football team 2, Browns, then Saints, Buccaneers, Cardinals. You can say what you want to say. The Browns were beat up, but you look at the Buccaneers and the 49ers are up there, and they're still playing.
Yeah, I mean, we knew the Browns were beat up all year, right? And they missed guys with COVID, right? That 2-week COVID stretch was huge. When the Browns were trying to make the playoffs, they didn't leave themselves any margin for error with their poor play early or inconsistent play, and then they get hit by COVID. So that was a big part of the year, but I do believe they should have overcome it. You pointed out teams that did overcome it. Joe Bitonio said, hey, we had enough guys on this roster. We still should have made the playoffs despite everything. Now, that's a luck factor with the injuries. In some years you get the benefit and some you don't. The Bengals are real low on that list, and I think they benefited from that, and they wound up winning the division. And the Ravens obviously were decimated, and that probably cost them the division. I'm sure it cost them the division, given the number of big names they had and the fact that they were able to win 8 games before the bottom completely fell out. So you can't ignore the injuries, and it's a factor. It's like referees. I just would not use it as an excuse.
Absolutely. Just again, pointed that out just to illustrate the injuries. Certainly not an excuse. All right, Browns graded offensive line, how they graded out according to Pro Football Focus. This is the offensive line. So Bitonio, you see the grade, second among guards. Wyatt Teller, fifth among guards. J.C. Treader, fifth among centers. And here's the part where it gets a little dicey. The Conklin, 20th for tackles. Jedrick Wills, 54th. Important to note, both those guys were banged up all season, but you got to get significantly better play from your tackles, especially when the offensive line is considered to be a strength.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think Conklin's grade was affected by his injuries as well, right? It wasn't just the torn patellar late. He had the knee injury kind of early in the season. Then he had the dislocated elbow that he came back from. So he never got into a great rhythm. I think when he's healthy, he was an all-pro a year ago, right? So I think we can't forget that. Now, the question with him is, does he come back completely healthy from that torn patellar in time, right? And if, that's a tough injury, so you probably have to have a contingency there, playing there as well. To me, Wills is more concerning. Yes, he had the ankle injury suffered in week 1. Then he was in and out of the lineup, and then he sat for a couple games, and it probably bothered him throughout the season. But there are other things that, if you watch Jedrick Wills, kind of focus on him, he gave up some pressures. His run grade was not good on Pro Football Focus like he showed. I thought he didn't play through the whistle enough. It felt like there were plenty of plays where he would block and kind of the clock in his head was like, well, Baker should be getting rid of the ball. but Baker had gotten rid of the ball, and then Will's guy comes free. I feel like there's just a little bit, I don't want to say lack of effort, but a lack of tenacity, maybe a lack of physicality that you hope he can get past. Wyatt Teller said as much at the end of the year, you just need to work. He needs to know that he needs to work. And he even offered to have him work out with him in the offseason. So I think Wills has the talent, but he needs to take his game to another level to not only help that offensive line, but to prove that he was worth that number 10 pick in the draft, because that's a big resource.
Yeah, and one the Browns definitely were counting on. All right, top 10 rookie rankings according to ESPN.com. The top overall is Micah Parsons. Mac Jones is second. The Browns' Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah finishes ninth, and you see 76 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. You see where he was drafted. And also just missing out on the top 10 was Greg Newsome. So both of the Browns rookies, the top 2 picks, grading out among the top in the NFL. So the Browns got it right early in the draft. The depth later in the draft, probably not as much as they would have liked as far as help goes.
Yeah, I think Andrew Berry has to be really pleased with those first 2 picks. I think you could flip those guys if you wanted to. Now, I know Greg missed some games late in the year, right? He had that concussion in practice, cost him a couple games. He's on the COVID list too at the same time. If without that, without the missed time late, I think I would have put Newsome ahead of JOK just because I thought he was so consistent right out of the gate. And JOK kind of had a stop and start kind of season, given injuries and what else. But both of them played really well. You can see why the Browns really wanted JOK and were willing to trade up and spend a high pick on a linebacker, which you kind of questioned if they would ever do that, because he can be a game changer. He can make plays in space, and you can see that acceleration. And then Newsome, I think Newsome showed that he's a starting corner in this league, and you should be able to pair him and Denzel Ward together for a long time.
Yeah, I would agree. The lot of really talented pieces that are coming, still ascending, really. You think of Myles Garrett and you mentioned Newsome and JOK. There's a lot, Denzel Ward. There's a lot to like on that Browns defense. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, Scott kind of took a look at some things by the numbers. We'll take a look at some interesting numbers from the 2021 season. Some good, some not so good. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram as well as brownzone.com. So Scott wrote an article, Browns by the numbers. We're going to take a look at a couple of these things. So point differential, In the fourth quarter, Browns were minus 50 in the fourth quarter. You see, scored 80, gave up 130. Minus 22 was the point differential for the overall, the length of the games. You see some of the other numbers there. Scott, the point differential in the fourth quarter is stunning, especially when you consider how good the defense was. That shows you how much the offense struggled in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, there's a stretch there, Dave. I think it was like 7 or 8 games where they scored 1 touchdown combined in the fourth quarter. You just can't win games like that. The games are too close in this league, and we saw it, right? The Browns lost 6 games by 6 points or fewer. You point to the Baker was 0 for 5 with the chance to, lead a go-ahead drive in the fourth quarter, and that adds up, and that's why some teams go to the playoffs and some teams don't. And the Browns were outscored last year. I don't know the exact point differential, but they were outscored overall last year. And you could point to a couple of blowouts, right? The opener against Baltimore and the game in Pittsburgh, which kind of skewed things. But I think the overall point is, if your games are going to be all that close, right, and you don't have a big point differential, then you better be good in key moments. And the Browns weren't. In the fourth quarter stat proves that. The red zone stats prove it. The Browns were not good in the red zone. And that's why those close games go the other way.
Yeah, and another one that you had there was third down conversion. So the Browns converted 39.2% of the third down conversions, opponents 39.3%. And again, you see the Chase McLaughlin 40% from 40 to 49. That's got to improve. The sacks allowed by the Browns, 6th most in the NFL. And remember, we just told you how talented and how highly thought of the Browns' offensive line was. So to allow the 6th most amount of sacks, something's not adding up there.
Yeah, the third down one, real quick, it's interesting. I mean, they're so close, right? 39 point whatever. The offense was, I think they're both kind of middle of the pack. I think the offense was 17th in the league. The defense was 14th. The defense made big strides from not only 2020, but the beginning of 2021. Got much better on third down, and I think that was just a sign of the overall improvement of the defense. But then, you look at, gosh, David, slip my mind. What was the other stat we were talking about? Short-term memory. There's a big one too. The sacks. The sacks. Yeah, a lot of that's Baker Mayfield. Yes, the tackles struggled, but Baker's got to do a better job getting the ball out of his hands. And we saw the double clutches, the not throwing the first read, right? The first read comes open. You got to make that throw. I think he hesitated too often to do that. And part of that's on Baker Mayfield. Now, the protection wasn't nearly as good as it was the year before when you had your healthy tackles, but it's not all the offensive line.
No, and the saying is you have to trust what you see, and when you see him double clutching and doing those kind of things, kind of leads you to believe Baker Mayfield wasn't trusting what he saw there. All right, you also did the top 5 best and worst players. So let's take a look at the top 5. And yeah, I get that. Hard to argue with any of those guys. And you also kind of wonder when you have both of your guards and a running back, boy, why weren't you able to run the ball a little bit more effectively?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. And, for me, the biggest kind of decision there or debate was Bitonio or Chubb at number 2. Part of my reasoning is you see how a guy ranks in the league, right? Myles Garrett's an all-pro. Joe Bitonio's an all-pro. Joe Bitonio's, probably the best left guard in the league. I think you can make an argument Nick Chubb is the best or second best or third best running back in the league. It's so easy to see a running back compared to a left guard. So I struggled with if I should put Bitonio 2 or not, but I went with Chubb. But yeah, your point's right. When you have those guys, you should be able to run it better. And again, this is not, just pile on Baker. And it's not just Baker, it's the entire passing game. But teams the defenses were devoting a bunch of guys to stop the run. And that's when the passing game should be able to excel and should be able to capitalize. And it just didn't do that enough, whether that was Baker, whether it was a play calls, whether it was a lack of talent at receivers. The Browns passing game could not make the opposition pay for stacking the line to take away the run.
All right, and we'll look at the worst five. And again, it's not a surprise. We've talked about a couple of them already. Mayfield struggled, Wills struggled, Rashard Higgins kind of disappeared. Gillen, did disappear eventually. So those are the guys that have really struggled and really need to get things turned around.
Yeah, it's guys that I think you expected a lot more from. Obviously Baker's not a bottom five player. You can pick five guys that are just kind of random players. But it's guys that you go into the season thinking, okay, he's going to have a big impact and he's going to play well and he's at a key position. And then they don't live up to that. And that, we talked about Baker, we talked about Wills. Rashard Higgins, right? He wanted to come back. The Browns signed him to a cheap one-year deal to come back. And there were opportunities there, right? Odell leaves. Jarvis gets hurt. And yet Rashard Higgins could not make any kind of impact. And I don't think that's a coaching thing. I think that's Rashard Higgins is just a guy. Maybe he's done. He's been in the league for a while now. I think he's certainly done in Cleveland. But I know fans have high hopes and had high hopes for Rashard. And it didn't amount to much this year.
No, for whatever reason, it did not happen. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take one more time out on the other side of the break. Obviously, 2021, a disappointing season for the Browns. We'll get a thought of what happened. How did we get where we are? And we'll also look ahead some free agents that the Browns might be looking for and some contracts that Browns might be looking to get out from under. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick. So, Scott, you wrote an article, and you and I have talked about it briefly. 2021, a lot of expectations, and the Browns, anyway, there's no nice way to say it, they underachieved. So, how did they get there? How did we end up with what was expected to be a potential Super Bowl kind of team and not even making the playoffs?
Yeah, well, firstly, Baker just tweeted a video saying surgery went well, everything couldn't have gone any better. He's on the road to recovery. So we touched on that real early in the show. I think there's a bunch of factors. We mentioned injuries, right? That's a factor. The passing game, I can't get past that, Dave. If the passing game was marginally better, this team goes, instead of 8-9, goes at least 10-7, maybe 11-6. And I put a lot of that on Baker, but I'm not absolving Kevin Stefanski's system or his play calling. The inability to get the most out of OBJ or to get more out of OBJ, right? Yes, it came to a point where Odell made it where he could not stay, and the Browns realized that. But did it have to get to that point, right? If Kevin Stefanski designed better plays for Odell, if Baker had made better throws to Odell, could they have salvaged that and kept him happy enough where he would have played out the year and had a bigger impact, right? Especially in the red zone, which we're seeing what he's doing with the Rams. It took the defense a little while to gel, but I don't really think that hurt the team overall because they won 3 out of their first 4 games. So I go back to the passing attack and not being able to figure that out, too many penalties. But it felt like the margin was there. Like they had chances to win enough games and they just couldn't get it done late. And so many times that falls on your quarterback to make that play.
All right. So one of the guys that is a free agent, David Njoku. Let's take a look at his Pro Football Focus rankings. 15th out of 74. You see the grade. given the circumstances, it's interesting. He has certainly played like a tight end one. His blocking grade has kind of gotten better. What do you think? And we've kind of danced around it. He may be able to get a bigger contract than the Browns want to give him on the open market. I mean, he could very well. Someone could throw a lot of money at him.
Yeah, he's an intriguing guy, I think, around the league because he's still young, right? I mean, he's been in the league since 2007. He's like 25 or 26. Incredibly gifted physically, right? Jumps high, runs fast. I think he's got a little better catching the ball consistency-wise. You don't see as many drops. You still see some, but not, I don't think nearly as many. I do think he's improved as a blocker. You know, when you run the system Kevin Stefanski runs, you need a couple of good tight ends, right? You probably need 3 good tight ends. And Austin Hooper's been a disappointment. So I think that created a void, and David Njoku stepped into that void. And the question just is, how much do they pay him? I mean, they're paying Austin Hooper $10.5 million, right? So can you pay David Njoku more than that? It's kind of a tricky spot. But if you let David Njoku go, or he leaves in free agency because you're not willing to pay him or whatever, then you got to go replace him. And you're going to have to spend money to replace him with the guy that may not be as talented. So it is a tough spot for Andrew Berry.
Well, you know, you mentioned Austin Hooper. This is, according to the Bleacher Report, every team's worst contract. And right now, they say it's Austin Hooper. 4 years, $42 million, set to expire 2024, set to have a 13.1 cap hit next season, or 13.3 rather, cap hit next season. But again, if there's a way to minimize that, there's no way to put it. Austin Hooper has not been what the Browns had hoped he would be when they went out and signed him.
No, not at all. And he's not worth that contract, right? The question is, are you better off taking the cap hit and saving the salary that you would have to spend, have to pay him, and then going to get another tight end? And I don't know if the Browns would be better off, because he's still a player in this league. He's still, starting caliber or borderline starting caliber. He certainly would play a bunch next year if the Browns brought him back, because I think he does have value, especially as a blocker. He falls down too much after he catches passes, and he dropped too many balls this year. But I do think there's value there, but it's certainly not at $10.5 million. So that's a tough spot. I think Andrew Berry, not to take all the blame away from Andrew Berry, he knew he needed to go get tight ends when Kevin Stefanski took over. Hooper is probably the best one on that market. So he paid him, above what market value is, but that's what you do in free agency. And he winds up not living up to that. But I think it was kind of a tough spot for Andrew Berry. He needed to go get tight ends. So, it's tough because I think he does have value, but it's not that much value. And I'm really interested to see what the Browns do, because then, if they cut Hooper, then obviously you pay David Njoku, right? And then you go find somebody else. So that's one way they could go, or they could try to run it back and pay both those guys for one season, one more season. I could see that scenario too. And then you move on from Hooper after 2022 and you kind of address other needs, because right now they do have what seems like enough salary cap flexibility.
Yeah, those are all the decisions that they have to make out in Berea with Andrew Berry, and they will do that in the next few months. Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. Scott, as always, man, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, Scott Petrak, make sure you read him in the pages of the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as on brownzone.com on the internet. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, the D-Man, Dennis Manoloff from News Radio WTAM 1100 joins us. We're still talking Browns. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C. where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE, and let's take a look at the 2021 draft. So the draft that was before this previous season. This is according to Bleacher Report. They obviously like the top two picks in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and Greg Newsome. But when you get past that, the grade falls to a B. So Cleveland deserves credit for landing studs in Newsome and Owusu-Koramoah, finding a gem late in the draft in Felton. However, this class didn't provide the depth the Browns needed to navigate mountain-sized rash of injuries and absence. Let's welcome in the D-man, Dennis Manoloff. And Dennis, when you look at the draft, it was a pretty good draft. If you come away with guys like Newsome and Owusu-Koramoah, it's a really good draft. Other than that, you're nitpicking. Now, I get where Bleacher Report is going, and it would have been nice to hit on a couple of the other guys in the mid-rounds.
Yeah, I agree. I probably would have bumped it up to a B+ or an A- for exactly what you said. If you hit on your first two picks, that's terrific. And clearly the Browns have a quality corner in Greg Newsome and a quality linebacker, Swiss Army knife in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Of course you would like to hit on every pick or at least have depth coming in later rounds. Unfortunately for Cleveland, the past few drafts, the depth hasn't really come to the fore in the later rounds. So, yes, it's not a perfect draft at all, but I certainly trust Andrew Berry and his scouts in the early rounds.
Yeah, and again, you have found two guys in Owusu-Koramoah and Greg Newsome who look like they're going to be the cornerstones of a really good defense. So it's hard to argue with that. All right, Mel Kiper Jr., draft guru from ESPN, has been doing it probably longer than anybody. Came out with his first mock draft. Take a look who he has the Browns selecting at number 13. D-Man, I think you would like this pick very much. Interestingly enough, Wilson's the second wide receiver off the board. Kiper had London Drake going to the Jets at 10, but I know you are quite fond of this guy, and a lot of Browns fans would love it if Garrett Wilson is the pick at 13.
For sure. I mean, the Guardians, the Browns, they need an explosive wide receiver. And I will take issue, though, at the end of the comment. I mean, look at what Odell Beckham Jr. is doing with the LA Rams, okay? I mean, it's an OIC thing. It's only in Cleveland, but you got a guy who's absolutely what the Rams needed, especially when they lost Robert Woods. He's a touchdown maker. He's creating plays elsewhere. And so the Browns had that guy on their roster the past 2 years, meaning the Stefanski era. And I know he was coming back from, the torn ACL that he suffered in Cincy 2 years ago and all that kind of stuff. And he wasn't, we think, entirely healthy in Cleveland, although he certainly looks healthy now in LA. But this was the explosive wide receiver that the Browns thought they had. So the question is, was he just that desperate to get out of here because he wanted to go somewhere else? Or was he desperate to get out of here because he was underused, he didn't like the quarterback situation, and he didn't think the head coach and OC were dialing up enough for him? I don't know if we'll ever get the answer to that question, but it's certainly painful to watch Odell Beckham Jr. doing what he's doing for the Rams. But now that he's out of here, you have to look for a legitimate stud wide receiver. Donovan Peoples-Jones, making strides, looks like he could be a solid to good NFL player. But he's not an explosive number one. Jarvis Landry, veteran, wily veteran. We don't even know if he'll be back at $15 million or so next year. But even then, even if you did bring Jarvis back, he's not your stud number one. You've got to get somebody like that. And I think Garrett Wilson fits that bill.
Well, here's the question, though. Is it the system? I mean, Stephon Diggs was in the system and didn't want to be in it. There's there's a lot of guys who profile as that number one receiver who want no part of this because it doesn't allow you the freedom to freelance when you see something. You know, it's do this, get here, be there when I want to throw you the ball.
Yeah, Dave, and when I do the shows for WTAM 1100, some of the texts have come in that the Browns have an offense straight out of the 1950s, you know, with the power running game and the tight ends and the heavies and all that stuff. And you know what? I mean, yeah, I said after the final game when the Browns fell to 8-9 for the season and were out of the money. I mean, of course, we knew they were out two games earlier, but I said they're going to have to take a long look at their passing game. They're going to have to take a long look at their philosophies, and they're going to have to see, does what we do work in today's NFL? Now, I think they'll come back because they're so intelligent and they're stubborn, and intelligent people are generally the most stubborn people I've ever met because they have incredible belief in their intellect. I think they'll come back and say, our system works. Kevin Stefanski's system works. And they'll point to 2020 as evidence. And they'll say, look, when Baker was relatively healthy, he was fine. We were spreading the ball around. We were winning games. So just because things went off the rails in 2021 doesn't mean that Stefanski's offense doesn't work. But I get your overall point. You know, Diggs and then Beckham. I mean, what is going on here as far as why wasn't Odell Beckham Jr. targeted more or able to make explosive plays that he's making in LA?
Yeah, and you know what? You mentioned this is a very intelligent front office. Those are the questions they have to go sit down and figure out. That's the only way you get better is figure out why that didn't work, but it clearly didn't work. All right, 3 tempting free agents the Browns should avoid signing. This is from dogpounddaily.com. They go Anthony Walker, one of their own, Sheldon Richardson, who was here a season ago and left via free agency, and Michael Gallup, who is coming off an ACL injury, an intriguing wide receiver. When you look at those, which of those are you really tempted by, and which ones are you passing on?
I mean, I don't know what PFF's grade was for Anthony Walker, but I mean, I thought he was okay, you know, in the time he was out there. So maybe I missed something. Yeah, Sheldon Richardson, I wouldn't revisit that. Although the Browns desperately need interior defensive line help, you know, and they might need an edge rusher help if Clowney moves on. But so yeah, I mean, and Richardson's not an edge, of course, but they do have a need at the DT as well as potentially a DN. And, you know, as far as Michael Gallup goes, nothing against him. I'm sure Michael Gallup is going to continue to be a really good wide receiver. But I'm not going to be the one, if I'm the Browns or any team, I'm not going to be the one who takes the chance on the guy, you know, right away. Even though we just saw Beckham come off of torn ACL and do okay with Cleveland and then great with the Rams. I just would rather pass, especially if that's going to be a free agent signing. I want to get my stud wide receiver out of the draft.
All right. Before we go to a quick break, what do the Browns need to add? If you're talking to Andrew Berry and how do you get back to the playoffs? What absolutely positively needs to get fixed this offseason to make this team a playoff team again? And it won't be easy because their division's loaded.
Yeah, I'll go back to what I said a few minutes ago. I think they really have to take a long look at the passing game, and they have to be honest with themselves. You know, Kevin Stefanski, if you look at his history in big games, going back to when he was OC with the Vikings, it's not necessarily a pretty picture. And I don't know that you can sustain the type of offense that Stefanski wants to run in today's NFL. You look at for example, the landscape of quarterbacks, and then specifically the quarterbacks who were in, because some of them are out now, obviously, this year's playoffs. And everybody but Jalen Hurts and maybe Roethlisberger was top 16 in the NFL in passing yards. I think Roethlisberger might have been 16. Hurts was the only one that was outside the top 20 anyway. And the bottom line is you have to be able to throw the ball in today's NFL. You have to get the ball down the field. You can't rely on the running game, even though we know that Nick Chubb is a great back. And if you bring Kareem Hunt back, he's a quality back. It's not today's day. It's not the game. And it's not what you do to score points in a hurry in this 21st century NFL. So I think first and foremost, you have to take a long look at the passing game. And then you have to hope that Baker Mayfield returns to health and is close to what you thought, even though they didn't draft him, what you think a number 1 overall pick might look like. Because I don't see a realistic option at quarterback that's appreciably better than Baker Mayfield when healthy. Meaning I don't see Aaron Rodgers coming here, Russell Wilson coming here, even Deshaun Watson coming here. The draft class is weak, and as far as relatively speaking, over the years, this is not a burgeoning quarterback draft class. And when it comes to trading or free agency quarterbacks, generally, except in those cases I mentioned, Rodgers, Wilson, and Watson, teams that have good quarterbacks are going to hang on to them. So, and by the way, I think Rodgers stays in Green Bay, especially if he goes to the Super Bowl. So that would be the key to me, is figure out what to do about the passing game and get Baker healthy, ready to go in 2022.
D-Man, Dennis Manoloff and I are to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we shift our attention. We'll talk a little bit of the Cavs. Cavs playing well, just a game and a half out of first place in the Eastern Conference over midway through the regular season. Sports4CLE will be back talking Cavs. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine. Too late at night. But feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
We turn our attention to the Cavs, currently 27 and 18, fourth place leading the Eastern Conference, just a game and a half out of first. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, talking Cavs and trade.
Hello, this is Tim Track Timmy, a.k.a. Little Dog. This is about the Cavaliers and their trade. Okay, if the Cavs are going to do anything, they talk about signing somebody. You need to go look at this kid, Bobo, or DeAndre Jordan out of the Cavs. Now, if you see how our front court is, that would fit into play perfectly. No Dennis Schroeder, no Eric Gordon. We don't need those type of players here, okay? They're going to shoot too many shots and make too many turnovers. I think that Darius Garland and Rondo is a good – because everybody knows this is playoff Rondo. We haven't seen – people, if you haven't seen Rondo, we're getting ready to see playoff Rondo. He's going to facilitate fake passes, all that. What the Cavs need to concentrate on, get one of the Joes. Get one of the Joes. Get an average Joe. Joe Harris, just get a Joe. Joe, no.
All right, D-Man, I tend to agree to a point. DeAndre Jordan doesn't interest me, but they don't need a superstar. They need a guy that can put in 15, 17 points, replace what was missing with Colin Sexton's scoring load. And if they get that, they're going to be a handful, especially the way they play defense. Main thing is they can't mess with the chemistry. They got a good thing going, and I think they know that.
Well, first of all, I love any caller to voice of truth and reason. Honestly, I'd like Luka Doncic. I'd like Trae Young. I'd like LeBron James, Jimmy Butler, on down with Bradley Beal. The problem is you just can't get these guys because you automatically want them. And I know that the caller wasn't asking for the moon there in some sense, but, for example, Joe Harris. I mean, the Brooklyn Nets, first of all, Harris has to get back from his injury. Secondly, the Brooklyn Nets, they would like Joe Harris, I would think. He's a sniper. He's 45% from three. And so he's part of their mosaic if they want to win a title. I don't know what his injury timetable is, though. So you say, well, we want Joe Harris. Well, the Nets don't want to trade him, I don't think. Maybe they do, but I would think that Joe Harris is a part of the solution for them if they can get everybody healthy and rolling for the playoffs. As far as DeAndre Jordan, hard pass. Do not get near that guy. I mean, come on now. He's done. DeAndre Jordan's done. And you know what? You don't need another big necessarily. I think the key to focus on for Kobe Altman is that 2-3, as you said, Dave, that scoring threat, that sniper from three, in that 2-3 position. And that's where they're going to put their resources.
All right, this one is intriguing. Here's a Ben Simmons trade scenario. This is from NBA analysis.net. They have the Cavs receiving Ben Simmons and the 76ers receiving Colin Sexton, Ricky Rubio, Lowry, Markkanen, 2023 1, 2025 1 from the Cavs. Yeah, G-Man, I'm intrigued only because that's not a lot to give up. But it goes back to what I just got done saying. You got to get somebody that fits in. The one thing that Ben Simmons is 6'10", and you're improving your defense significantly. You're losing a little bit in shooting. Markkanen's been kind of on and off.
Dave, I'm not bullish. I'm not in love with Ben Simmons, okay? But I recognize he has value, as you said, a defender, really a lockdown defender and whatnot. But there is no way in bleep that the Philadelphia 76ers are making that trade. I'm not trying to disrespect whoever wrote that, but you got to be living on Mars if you think Daryl Morey and Elton Brand are going to make that trade. No chance. I keep telling people who have this pipe dream about Ben Simmons. And again, I'm not sitting there saying, the Cavs got to get Ben Simmons, got to get Ben Simmons. But if I wanted Ben Simmons desperately, I know if I'm the Cavs that the first two guys who are going to be mentioned by the 76ers are Evan Mobley and Darius Garland. You will have to give up one of those two guys, and that's just a start to the party, all right? Because the Philadelphia 76ers did not go down this road. They didn't go down this length of a dig-in with Ben Simmons in their head-to-head feud. They didn't go down this road to just send him somewhere for nothing, okay? And I mean, yeah, it seems like that proposal has teeth because it has names in it and draft picks and a lot of volume. But honestly, if you don't start with Mobley or Garland and move from there, you don't have a realistic trade proposal with the Philadelphia 76ers.
And you know what? I'm with you. I'm not doing either. There's no way I'm dealing Allen, Mobley, or Garland. Those are your core. And if you can add to it and supplement it, you got some stuff that you can build around. All right. Having said that, what do you think the Cavs need to add? Trade deadline is February 10th, so it's like 3 weeks and a day or two away. What do they need to add to make that run? I mean, they're a game and a half out of first place in the Eastern Conference, and their next 10, they play the Bulls tonight. Their next 10, the average percentage of win is .391, so they can make some hay in the next. There it is, right there. That's after the Bulls tonight. There are the next 10 games, so they can make some hay in the Eastern Conference here. What do they need to go get?
I mean, this team is so much fun, and that's the operative word, F-U-N, fun. They're playing the game the right way. They get contributions from pretty much anybody who steps on the court. They figured out how to play a good team defense, which I didn't know was possible during this rebuild based on the previous 3 seasons and the first 2 games of this season when the Cavs gave up 255 combined points at Memphis and home to Charlotte. And they were 0-2, and I'm like, oh man, are they ever going to buy in defensively? Well, the very next game, that third game, the day after the Charlotte home opener, they locked down Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks, held them to 95, beat them, I think, 101-95. And that was the beginning of this commitment to defense. Now, it hasn't always been pretty, but the key to this whole team, I thought, was they had to have some semblance of defense to go with what looked to be offensive firepower. And now you finally got it, and players have bought in. And so you're getting contributions from these guys at both ends of the court, not just trying to stuff the stat sheet offensively. As far as what they need, I mean, I mentioned snipers. They could use a guy, I don't know, and Eric Gordon comes to mind as a possible fit. I don't know what it would take to get Gordon, but, I'd like one of those catch and shoot 3-point guys, somebody to add more offensive punch, take some of the pressure off of Sir Isaac Okoro. And by the way, Isaac Okoro, okay, rough around the edges offensively. That's obvious. But this guy has turned into a lockdown defender. He is a nasty defensive player. I mean, we knew it coming out of the draft, but to see it in the NBA over the past 2 years, to see it actually translate has been really enjoyable. And he's contributing in bits and pieces offensively. So I'm warming more and more to Isaac Okoro. That said, you'd like to get some offense from the 2 or the 3 or the combo 2-3 position.
The D-Man, Dennis Manoloff, as always, man, appreciate the time and the insights. You can listen to the D-Man News Radio, WTAM 1100, as well as 106.9 FM. D-Man, as always, man, appreciate the time and the insight.
Thank you very much, Dave.
All right, Dennis Manoloff. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guest, Browns beat reporter Mary Kay Cabot from the Flame Dealer, as well as cleveland.com, and Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. That's tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE. We'll see you then. Have a great night, everybody.